Gracie's trial and divorce.
Hello. Welcome to GNN News. We interrupt this program with some breaking news. 2 weeks ago, an act of aggravated assault has occurred at the Rapper City Police Station. The suspect behind this assault was one of the latest inmates, Gracie Davis. And the main victim was her own cellmate/husband, Andres Davis. One of the officers from the police department bore witness to it and put Gracie in solitary confinement. And in the process, the officer in question gathered up new evidence concerning not just the convict's daughter Alexine, but her youngest children, Cody and Julianne. We're going live now with reporter Brian Kent for more information on this matter.
Thank you, George. I'm standing outside the police station with Commissioner Angle and one of his officers. They're going to explain everything that happened inside the building. Commissioner, can you walk us through this whole incident that occurred inside your precinct?
Certainly, reporter Brian Kent. According to the officer right next to me, Officer McCarthy, one of our latest inmates, Gracie Davis, brutally attacked her own husband and raised with a bat in their own cell. So McCarthy took Gracie out of their cell and put her in solitary confinement before returning to help and raise up. Afterwards, she gathered up more evidence against Gracie herself.
Okay, Commissioner. And Officer McCarthy, would you like to share with us what evidence you gathered from the incident?
Of course, Mr. Kent. After when I took Gracie out of her cell and put her in solitary confinement, Andres gave me the whole story of what happened between them and their 3 kids. As it turns out, Gracie was the brains behind all the abuse endured by not just their eldest daughter Alexine, but also their youngest kids, Cody and Julianne. According to Andres, Gracie's been abusing Cody and Julianne mostly while he was at work. From what he told me, she slapped their 2 youngest kids in the face and left them at home alone without a babysitter. And what's worse, she even threatened to murder her own husband, mostly with a gun, if he ever tried to stop her from abusing any of their children again. And to add further insult, she threatened to have our other 2 inmates, Curtis and Winter Wilson, Tripp's own parents, abuse them as well.
So based on everything Andre told Officer McCarthy, additional charges had to be pressed against not just Gracie Davis, but Curtis and Winter Wilson too.
Goodness gracious. That's insane. George, are you getting all this?
Yup. I think I've seen enough. Well folks, you all heard it. It seems that Gracie Davis was the one behind all the abuse that was committed against not just Alexine, but Cody and Julianne as well. And there were additional charges pressed against her for death threats, child neglect, and conspiracy, which was also another charge pressed against Curtis and Winter Wilson. Therefore, the charges for child abuse that were previously pressed against Andres Davis have been dropped and he's agreed to testify against his wife alongside their children. And that's it for today's news flash. We now return you to our regularly scheduled program. This is Anchorman George Cummingham, signing off.
At the courthouse.
All rise for the Honorable Judge Alfred Smith.
You may all be seated. All right. Court is now in session. Gracie Davis, though there were initially charges pressed against you and your husband, it's come to my attention that there were additional charges pressed against you as well. Prosecutor Henry Maverick, read the charges.
Gracie Davis, you were initially charged for child abuse, child abandonment, and child neglect, but you are also charged for illegal conspiracy and threats of murder.
How do you plead?
Not guilty, Your Honor. Alexine deserved every single punishment I gave her. She and her best friend Simona bullied Osiris's younger brother Justin and Phoenix over their autism. She also bullied Ruby and assaulted Akio out of racism.
Tripp and Alexine already learned their lesson when they got arrested for what they did, especially when I let them off with a warning. But that's no reason for you to abuse her or her younger siblings. So, I call upon my first witness, Riot Naka.
You know, Gracie, when I saw you and Andres disowning Alexine for what she and Tripp did to my son Akio, I had no idea that you were using your own husband to help you abuse her. But when I heard that you assaulted Andres in your own cell here in Rapper City and that you also abused Cody and Julianne behind your husband's back, I was shocked beyond belief. I'm afraid I'm gonna have to plead you guilty as charged. What you did was messed up.
Thank you, Ryo. I call upon my next witness, Chiyotnaka.
I agree with Ryo. Even I didn't expect Gracie to do something so cruel. So I say she's guilty.
Thank you, Chiyo. I call upon my next witness, Akio Tanaka.
You know, when I saw that video made by Sage, Vincent, Michael Gale, and Dustin Halifax, I thought that Alexine was abused by both her parents. But I'm surprised that all the abuse was her mom's idea and that her dad never wanted to give her the belt or disown her in the first place. At this point, Mrs. Davis is the only one I plead guilty. Not Mr. Davis. Just her.
Thank you, Akio. I call upon my next witness, Sara Tanaka.
I agree with Akio. I say Mrs. Davis is guilty.
Thank you, Sara. I call upon my next witness, Ren Tanaka.
I'm on the same page as Akio and Sora. I say Alexine's mom's guilty.
Thank you, Ren. I call upon my next witness, Sakura Tanaka.
So am I. Sure, Alexine assaulted my brother Akio, but even I know that wasn't serious enough for her mom to disown her or even trick her dad into helping her do so. So I say she's guilty.
Thank you, Sakura. I call upon my next witness, Kenji Tanaka.
I agree with my older siblings. I find Alexine's mom guilty.
Thank you, Kenji. I call upon my next witness, Hiroshi Tanaka.
So do I. I find Mrs. Davis guilty as charged too.
Thank you, Hiroshi. I call upon my next witness, Akira Tanaka.
What Alexine did to my older brother Akio was bad, but what happened to her and her younger siblings was no better. So I find Mrs. Davis guilty.
Thank you, Akira. I call upon my next witness, Patrick Westbrook.
You know, I'm beginning to see why Alexine became a bully in the first place. Gracie treated her just as badly as she did the latter's younger siblings. No wonder she bullied Ruby. I was gonna plead both her and Andres guilty, but since Gracie assaulted him after when they both got arrested, she's the only guilty one here.
Thank you, Patrick. I call upon my next witness, Sadie Westbrook.
I agree with Patrick. I say Gracie's guilty as charged.
Thank you, Sadie. I call upon my next witness, Ruby Westbrook.
Mrs. Davis, I know Alexine bullied me and assaulted Akio with Trip's help, but now I know why she did all that stuff. You're the reason why she ever became a bully in the first place. You even assaulted her younger siblings and threatened to murder their own dad. I mean, come on, what has gotten into you? You know what? Never mind. You're guilty. Completely guilty as charged.
Thank you, Ruby. I call upon my next witness, Rodrigo Evans.
Even though Alexine bullied my son Justin and his best friend Phoenix all because of their autism, her mother's been abusing her and her younger siblings for years. Gracie even tricked her own husband Andres into helping her give their first daughter the belt and disown her. Therefore, I say she's guilty.
Thank you, Rodrigo. I call upon my next witness, Gio Evans.
Gracie, are you insane? Abusing Alexine and your own youngest kids? And threatening to kill Andres if he tried to stop you again? I don't know what's gotten into you, but you've really crossed a line here. You should be ashamed of yourself, Missy.
Now you listen here, Gia. Don't go around judging me. You and Rodrigo were the ones who gave Osiris the belt for what he and Nash did to Stephanie and Michael Dale.
Hey! Rodrigo and I may have given Osiris the belt for what he and Nash did to Stephanie and Michael, but that's nothing compared to what you did. You've done much worse than this.
Ladies, you two settle down right now. I will not have this trial turn into a bloody catfight.
Sorry, Your Honor. More to the point, for everything Gracie did to her family, I say she's guilty.
That's more like it. And speaking of Osiris, may I call him up to the stand, please?
Mrs. Davis, what gave you the right to criticize my parents like that? My mom has a point about the stuff you did, especially to Alexine. Yes, my parents gave me the belt, but they are not as cruel as you were. They love me just as much as they do my younger siblings. especially my brother Justin. And I'll bet that even he wouldn't approve of the way you treated Alexine and her younger siblings. So for everything you've done, I find you guilty.
Thank you, Osiris. I call upon my next witness, Justin Evans.
You know, when Phoenix and I buried the hatchet with Alexine and Simona, I thought that both of Alexine's parents abused her willingly. But I'm surprised that Mr. Davis had no intention of abusing her or her younger siblings. Mrs. Davis was even crazier than I thought. But nevertheless, I say she's guilty.
Thank you, Justin. I call upon my next witness, Caleb Evans.
I agree with my older brothers. I say Mrs. Davis is guilty.
Thank you, Caleb. I call upon my next witness, Claire Evans.
I'm with my brothers on this one too. Alexine's mom's even crazier than Osiris's former principal. So I say she's guilty.
Thank you, Claire. I call upon my next witness, Megan Evans.
I'm on the same page as my family. I find Mrs. Davis guilty as charged. She's a real psychopath.
Thank you, Megan. I call upon my next witness, Phoenix.
Sure, Alexine and Simona bullied me and my best friend Justin, but Mrs. Davis, you went too far by tricking her dad into helping you give her the belt and disown her. And to add further insult, you've been abusing Alexine's younger siblings behind their dad's back too. So for everything you did, I find you guilty as charged.
Thank you, Phoenix. I call upon my next witness, Digital Gavin.
You know, Gracie, I remember when Alexine flirted with my son Eric 2 years ago and ruined Stephanie's slumber party. But what you did to all three of your kids was much worse. You're just as bad as my ex. So for everything you've done at Springfield, I say you're guilty.
Thank you, Digital. I call upon my next witness, Eric Gavin.
You know, Mrs. Davis, I can definitely see where Alexine learned how to be manipulative. It's because of how badly you treated her and her dad. So for that, I say you're guilty.
Thank you, Eric. I call upon my next witness, Stephanie Gavin.
You know, Mrs. Davis, when I went with Ruby and Serenity to reconcile with Trip and Alexine, I was surprised to learn about your true colors. You tricked Alexine's own dad into helping you give her the belt and disown her. You even abused her younger siblings behind his back. And for that, I say you're guilty.
Thank you, Stephanie. I call upon my next witness, Natalie Gavin.
And here I thought that our former mom's the only psycho Karen in town. Alexine's mom's acting just like her. Only worse, even going as far as sending a death threat to Mr. Davis. That's just wrong. Mrs. Davis is acting just like Doro's mom, Samantha Webster's former dad, and Rocky Beyonder's version of my mom. I mean, threatening to murder someone in her own family with a gun. She's totally crossed the line. I find her guilty and I hope that she gets sent to prison for a long, long time.
Thank you, Natalie. I call upon my next witness, Terrence Gavin.
I agree with my older siblings. I find Alexine's mom guilty as charged.
Thank you, Terrence. I call upon my next witness, Elizabeth Gavin.
I'm on the same page as my family. Alexine's mom's even worse than my former mom. So I say she's guilty.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I call upon my next witness, Joseph Gavin.
So am I. I remember when my mom threatened to murder a taxi driver in GoAnimate's channel and gave Stephanie the same sort of threat in Roku-kun the Beyonder's channel. But what Alexine's mom did to her dad was the same sort of thing Samantha's former dad did to her mom. Therefore, I say Mrs. Davis is guilty as charged.
Thank you, Joseph. I call upon my next witness, Charles Martel.
You know, Gracie, it's one thing for Alan to drag me and Rio into the bus assault against Trip and your daughter, but for you to threaten to murder your own husband with a gun. All because he's been trying to stop you from abusing all three of your kids. You're acting just like Pierre Webster when he threatened to shoot Lisa in the head. For all the stuff you did back at Springfield, I say you're guilty.
Objection, Your Honor. Charles has no right to judge me for the way I've been treating Alexine. He himself was also involved in most of those mass assaults against her friends.
That doesn't mean I planned those mass assaults. I was framed for the corruption scandal and Alan started all the mass assaults that occurred at high school.
Silence. Order in the court. Order in the court. Gracie, Your objection is overruled, because the records show that Charles was framed for corrupting the police force at Springfield by Sean Buford, and there was evidence to prove his innocence. So your defense does not hold water. So if you and Charles are done fighting, may I call Lily Martle up to the stand, please?
I agree with Charles. At first I was gonna find both Andres and Gracie guilty as charged, but since Andres didn't abuse Alexine willingly, I'll just make the plea against Gracie.
Thank you, Lily. I call upon my next witness, Sage Martle.
You know, Mrs. Davis, as a man of my word, I was gonna testify against both you and Alexine's dad, but I had no idea that you threatened to murder him when he tried to stop you from abusing her and her younger siblings. You're just as crazy as Stephanie's mom. So for everything you've done, especially to Alexine, I say you're guilty.
Thank you, Sage. I call upon my next witness, Vincent Martle.
I agree with Sage. I say that Alexine's mom's guilty as charged. She's like a Tiana 2.0.
Thank you, Vincent. I call upon my next witness, Trip Wilson.
Wow. I'm totally shocked by what I heard. Mrs. Davis, it's one thing for you to abuse not just Alexine, but her younger siblings. It's even worse when you threaten to murder their own dad for trying to stop you from abusing them even more. But to threaten to get my parents involved in the scheme of yours? That is so wrong. For that, I find you guilty. Stay away from my parents and my girlfriend.
You stay away from my daughter Trip. You've been a bad influence to her.
Not so fast. You will not lay one single finger on the witness. You've been a bad influence to his parents. And I'm sure your husband would like to have a word with them. And he's not the only one who would like a word with you. Speaking of which, may I call Maria Easton up to the stand, please?
Really, Gracie? Threatening to murder your own husband for trying to stop you from abusing Alexine and her younger siblings? You're just as crazy as my husband is. I understand that both our daughters, Alexine and Simona, bullied Justin and his best friend Phoenix, but you did the same thing to Andres that Dan did to me. And like Dan made me do to Simona, you made Andres help you give Alexine the belt for that act of bullying. You even forced him to go along with Alexine's disowning, and for that, I say you're guilty.
Thank you, Maria. I call upon my next witness, Simona Easton.
Mrs. Davis, you have really crossed the line this time. It was bad enough that you gave Alexine the belt and disowned her, but threatening to murder her own dad is even worse. And so was abusing her own younger siblings and threatening to have Trip's parents do the same thing. For all the stuff you did, I find you guilty and hope you get locked up in a cage without a key.
Thank you, Simona. I call upon my next witness, Adriana Easton.
I agree with Simona and our mom. I say Alexine's mom's guilty as charged.
Thank you, Adriana. I call upon my next witness, Savannah Buford.
Savannah? You're testifying against me? Why?
Look, Gracie, I get why you treated Alexine the way you did. Believe me, Sean had me disown our son too for all the stuff he did. But you manipulated Andres just like Sean did to me. Only worse. You even gave Andres the same sort of death threats that Pierre did Lisa when they disowned Samantha. And for that, I have no choice but to find you guilty as charged. Hopefully you'll learn your lesson after spending a long time in prison.
Crikey. Traitor. You'll pay for this.
Oh no, she won't. If you try to attack Savannah, I'll hold you in contempt. Now, stand down.
Humph. Lucky.
I heard that. Anyway, I call upon my next witness, Deacon Buford.
You know, Mrs. Davis, you're starting to remind me of my dad, because when I went to my parents' apartment to confront him for everything he did, he threatened to shoot me. Just like you did to Alexine's dad when he tried to stop you from abusing her and the younger siblings. You're just as insane as my dad is. And for that, I say you're guilty.
Thank you, Deacon. I call upon my next witness, JG the Animator 05, aka Joseph Garbutt.
Gracie, I am very disappointed in you. Sure, Alexine flirted with Eric, forced Althea Andrea to become a troublemaker again, taunted people with Simona, ruined Stephanie's slumber party with her, Trip, and Deacon. Bullied Ruby, Justin, and Phoenix, the latter two of which alongside Simona, and teamed up with Trip to assault Akio. But you've been abusing her and her younger siblings for years. Mostly behind Anders' back. I mean, are you serious? Have you gone mad? This is completely unacceptable. And since you've had a complete lack of remorse for everything you've done to your children, I say you're guilty.
Thank you, JG the Animator 05. I call upon my next witness, Electrical Grape.
Well, look who it is, Gracie Davis, the one woman who started this whole thing with Alexine.
Electrical Grape, I presume.
That's right. Anyway, Your Honor, Gracie's been a bad mother to not just Alexine, but Cody and Julianne too. She's been physically abusing and neglecting her youngest son and daughter mostly while their father was at work. And when Andres tried to stop her, she threatened to murder him. Most of the time, whenever she sends him a death threat, she threatens to kill him with a gun. And what's worse, she threatened to have all three of their kids get abused by Curtis and Winter Wilson, Trip's parents. Therefore, I say she's guilty.
Crowtoon Productions Incorporated, can you and Crow Girl 22 come up to the stand, please?
Yes, Your Honor.
Is everything that Electrical Grape said about Gracie true and accurate?
As a matter of fact, it is. As for you, Gracie, when Electrical Grape made a community post about all the stuff you did as part of her storyline, I was shocked beyond belief.
I agree. We thought that you and Andres worked together to abuse Alexine, but ever since we found out that you were using him to give her the belt and the bucket, we felt bad for him.
And seriously, threatening to shoot Andres with a gun and have Curtis and Winter abuse all three of your kids, to keep him from trying to stop you from harming them. You are completely insane. And for that, I speak for myself and Crowgirl 22 when I find you guilty as charged. And Andres is not gonna be happy when he comes up to the stand.
Leave that to me. I call upon the first main victim of the crime, Andres Davis.
Andres, don't you dare testify against me.
Sorry, Gracie, but you leave me no choice. Your Honor, my wife's gone crazy. While I was working, she's been abusing all three of our kids behind my back. She even threatened to murder me with a gun and have Curtis and Winter abuse them if I ever tried to stop her from harming any of our kids even further. And before Alexine got expelled and arrested for assaulting Akio, Gracie used me to help her give her the belt for teaming up with Simona to bully Justin Evans and Phoenix. As for the day Alexine got expelled and arrested along with Trip, her mother forced me to go along with the disowning. I never wanted to abuse any of my kids, but Gracie made me do it. And when she and I got arrested, she secretly stole a baton and used it to assault me when I stood up to her. Therefore, I say she's guilty. And I want to file that psycho for a divorce. Permanently.
Oh my goodness. My word. Gracie, you stole a police baton, and used it to assault your own husband in prison. Have you lost your mind? My word. No wonder Andre's charges were dropped. Upon getting arrested, you committed theft and another act of aggravated assault. Gracie, what in blazes is wrong with you?
I object to everything Andres just said. I am not out of my mind. I only wanted what was best for our three kids. And yet Alexine acted racist and offensive to autistic people. Andres was only preventing me from disciplining those three brats when I saw fit. And I'm the bad guy?
Oh, you're definitely more than just the bad guy. You are a menace to society when you assault someone of your own blood, especially with the use of weapons. I call upon the next main victim of the crime, Alexine Davis.
My mom's been the worst parent I've ever had. She never loved me. She's been abusing me and my younger siblings even before I became a troublemaker at high school. She used my dad to help her give me the belt, all because Simona and I bullied Osiris's younger brother Justin and the latter's best friend Phoenix over their autism. She even forced my dad to disown me without his consent. She even threatened to not only murder him with a gun if he tried to stop her from abusing me, Cody, and Julianne, but she also threatened to have Trip's parents abuse us as well. I hate her so much. I don't want to be anywhere near that psychopath anymore. Therefore, I say she's guilty.
Thank you, Alexine. I call upon the next main victim of the crime, Cody Davis.
Adding on to everything Alexine just said, our mom's been treating me and Julian just as badly as she did our older sister. She's been physically abusing us and neglecting us. For example, she slapped me and Julian in the face and left us home alone without a babysitter. Therefore, I say she's guilty.
She did what? Julian, can you please come up to the stand?
Yes, Your Honor.
Is everything that Cody said about your mother true? Did she really slap you in the face and leave you two home alone without a babysitter?
As a matter of fact, she did. She never loved me, my brother, or our older sister. She's been treating all of us very badly for years. So for everything she's done, I say she's guilty as charged. And furthermore, I wish that she would stay in jail for a very long time and never come anywhere near us or our daddy ever again.
I have had enough! Guilty! 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 Guilty!
Gracie Davis, guilty. That's what you are. You're like an Australian version of Diana. No, you're worse than her. You're a female version of Pierre Webster. You are hereby sentenced to 90 years in prison. And you'll also be forced to sign the divorce papers. Officer McCarthy, get that psychotic witch out of my courthouse, and put her back in solitary confinement where she belongs.
All right, Gracie, you're in solitary confinement for 90 years. You are to stay away from your family at all times. And if you try to escape, you'll be given a much longer sentence.
Great. Not only did Andres file me for a divorce and take full custody of our kids, but I've been put in solitary confinement for 90 years. My family's so gonna pay for this. Hear that, Andres and Alexin? You two and the bratty kids are all gonna pay for leaving me here to rot behind bars. Jilly.